Ready, Lupita? My mic's not working. Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council special meeting of March the 12th, 2024. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarez. Here. Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Here.
Vice Mayor Salazar is on an excused absence with prior notice, and Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to the study session, item 3.
Item 3A, review the draft fiscal year 2025 capital improvement program budget and provide direction for final adoption on June 25th, 2024.
Thank you very much. Now we will turn it over to our city manager, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight is the ongoing conversation about our 24-25 budget, which we are, as you will recall, we're doing this in various steps. And so tonight is the first bite at the CIP. Tonight is no decisions. We're not asking you for any decisions. We're asking you for your questions and your comments and your thoughts about the CIP, how it's structured, why we are recommending what we are recommending based upon criteria, based upon funding availability, et cetera. So we have both our CFO, Nick Pigueros, our Public Works Director, Matt Lee, and his team here to answer all of your questions. But I'm going to turn this over to Nick first and see what comments he has. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And good evening, council. Is the presentation? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So the item before the council this evening is a study session, as the city manager pointed out. This is our first full presentation to council on the CIP budget, the Capital Improvement Program budget. However, we had provided a preview at the city council's retreat on February 2nd. So the agenda for this evening, I'll walk through some of the changes that are in the current draft CIP compared to the February 2nd CIP preview package. And then I'll also provide a overview by funding source for the CIPs in responsive to some questions the council had asked in previous meetings. Again, the objective here is to receive the updated draft CIP for fiscal year 25. It's a total of $43.7 million spending plan, with approximately half of that occurring in the enterprise funds. We also want to transmit through to the council the Revenue Measure Oversight Committee's recommendation for the fiscal year 25 CIP, and then most importantly, receive your feedback so that we can make the final touches and return to you in June for budget adoption. So to start with the changes from the February 2nd preview, I'll walk through these by funding sources. And so the first change I want to bring to your attention is the, let's see. Are the projects that were budgeted in the community facilities impact fees. Specifically, there were budget amendments that were approved at the last meeting. And in this particular fund, $1.8 million of that is the result of park and lieu fee refunds that were provided several years ago that were intended to fund the RAC. However, those funds were no longer available, and we appropriated those from the community facilities impact fee. And then the other amendment last meeting was $85,000 for a park assessment. The other significant change here is that the requested budget for 25 is slightly lower due to Measure K funding that was announced at the meeting when is everything okay at the last meeting. Oh, okay. Moving along to the Community Benefit Fund, as you know, at the last council meeting, the staff made a recommendation to use the Community Benefit Fund, specifically the YouTube Google Development Agreement to backfill or to eliminate the negative equity position in the city net and stormwater funds. And in addition to that, previous meeting, an additional $580,000 to build the Centennial Plaza. On the expenditure side, at the preview, we had put the police radio project in the community benefit fund. However, the action taken on the 27th provides no funds available for that particular project in the community development fund. However, we did in this document place the police radio under the general fund unreserved fund balance, and so. We can talk more about that if you like after the presentation. The only thing I would highlight here is that the community benefit fund is unrestricted and the general fund unreserved is unrestricted. And so this project, it doesn't particularly, I would say it's not, it was, the original recommendation was to fund this program, and that continues to be the recommendation. The source of the funds, however, are, and I hate to say this, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, given the nature of the two funds being unrestricted monies. Quick overview of CIP by project funding source. So here we have the general fund and street funds. A couple of items I want to highlight is that the pavement management program for fiscal year 25 is the recommendation is to include $4.5 million towards that project for a total project budget of $5.3 million. This proposal was presented to the to the Revenue Measure Oversight Committee, and the committee voted unanimously to recommend City Council approval of that request. You'll see here the columns are funds and the rows are projects, and most of the projects are funded by a single source with the exception of the pavement management program, which has Measure A contributions as well as Measure W. Moving on to community benefit, while I said in the previous presentation, in the previous slides that we effectively brought the community benefit from the YouTube Google project to zero, there were some residual funds. These projects were included in the February 2nd presentation, and just wanted to highlight those. One particular item on this list is the athletic field scoreboard replacement, which has a contribution from the user groups that will add $20,000 to this project to help build that. On the development impact fees, this budget includes 3 projects drawing from development impact fees. They're shown here. We have the community facilities as well as the governmental facilities, or the government facilities. And then finally, on the non-enterprise funds, we have grants and bequests. The first item there is a bequest from a bequest to the senior center that will allow us to replace the bathrooms or significantly renovate the bathrooms. And then the other items are grant funding or contributions from private groups or individuals. And then finally, the enterprise funds have a series of projects that are included in the packet. I didn't detail them here. However, our Public Works team is available to answer any questions on those. And then finally, just a reminder of the objective this evening is ultimately we're looking for council feedback so that we can finalize the CIP budget. I do want to bring the council's attention to an error that is in the budget document on the summary sheets for each. So if you go to page 14, for example, page 14 of the budget document, the second column with numbers that says actuals as of June 30 of 2023, that's a sum of all appropriations. So the first column, the fiscal year 24 column, and the total budget actuals and unfunded, those are all correct. there was an oversight in how the formulas were pulling from Excel. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. And now we will open up to colleagues. Again, this is not an action item. It's inquiries or additional questions to the items that have been brought forward in the 100-page report. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. Before I launch in any questions, I just want to acknowledge the effort that was put in to change the formatting of this and to make it more accessible. I know it was designed to make it more accessible to the public, but it certainly made it more accessible to me. This was the easiest budget document to follow that I've received since being on council, and it really makes it much easier for us to be able to tell the story to our constituents and to understand it ourselves. So I just really, really want to applaud the effort that was put into that. I have a couple of suggestions to continue that. I might as well just go right there. One of the question that I asked, seemed to ask again and again before I realized there was a pattern, was that the column for fiscal 25 proposed was just specifically for CIP. And when we're talking about a particular project, there's funding for lots of those projects that's coming from the operating budget as well. And not seeing that as part of it kind of just made it a little confusing for me, because it made it look like, oh, we're not investing in this particular project in 24-25, when in fact we are, but it's just not in the CIP budget. So a suggestion for the future might be to have another column for funding from outside CIP funding or previously funded or whatever, something along those lines, just so we get a complete picture of each project as we go through. I'm not asking it to be solved tonight, but just something to think about. So regarding the actual questions, let me get into my list here. I've got comments and questions, so I'm going to just mix all together. So, and this was addressed. A lot of these were addressed through the printed questions that I sent in advance. The Fire Station 52. The renovations and that particular project. It said that it's a combination of. Well, it wasn't 100% clear what was being spent. So I asked the question if these were specific improvements to the existing facility or planning activities for a replacement. I know that some of it is planning, trying to identify another site and all of that. But in the written response, it said it seemed to be in the past tense, that it was renovations that had already been completed. So I just wanted to kind of get a good sense of what the Fire Station 52 project in 24-25 constitutes.
Through the chair, Matt Lee, Public Works Director. That's a great question, because a couple of fiscal years ago, we were undergoing two efforts, right? One is to replace a fire station project, which takes an exorbitantly long time based on kind of where we want to be with it, and then there was an understanding that we had to keep the fire station operational as it is currently, and so it was not functional for what we did. We went through that effort, and we already enacted the repair through our facilities team with the contractor for the existing Fire Station 52. I believe this project itself is focusing on the new fire station, and our current project sponsor is the fire chief, and I'll let him talk a little bit about kind of where we are with that process in this effort and how that funding is playing out, and he can pass it back to me. Any additional questions?
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me okay on the mic? Okay, great. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Ari DeLay, your fire chief, thanks for having us this evening to speak. On the fire station replacement project itself, we're currently working on an effort to secure a best location. That project's kind of ongoing. We did if you recall, our standards of cover and community risk assessment back approximately a year or so ago, year and a half ago now. They've located an ideal kind of a prime location for us, or a zone to work in. We're currently exploring one potential parcel for that zone for the fire station itself. And we've conducted what we call phase one of a fault study to determine the possibility of an essential facility being built at that location. We've completed phase one. That phase one of the fault study has basically concluded that it is, adequate to be able to proceed to a phase two of a fault study. So we're working on securing that phase two of the fault study currently. So that will make a final determination if that parcel is buildable or not for the facility.
Great, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. One comment, and I know it was acknowledged in my in the written questions and response regarding the citywide baseball field lighting and fencing upgrades, and then also for the scoreboards. I want to make sure that we reach out to our large businesses in San Bruno and to our service clubs to see if they would want to make investments in there, because all of those entities have funded those items in the past. They certainly don't mind having the sponsor name on a scoreboard or whatever. And so that I mean, I want to make sure that we don't leave any stone unturned when looking for funding for these things, especially popular things that people like to fund like that. Moving on. The downtown beautification project was listed here. Just wanted to, since this is our first meeting, since that was the grant funding was approved from the Community Foundation, just wanted to take a moment to say how glad I am to see this project in the list and how grateful we are to the Community Foundation for approving that funding and making this important investment in our downtown. So that's just a comment. And also wanted to acknowledge, again, this has already been answered, so I know the answer, but I had the question about the water quality treatment plant that we share with South City, and how often we look at the balance between San Bruno and South San Francisco as to the usage of that facility, and it was answered that is measured yearly. So glad to see that, because I know South City is growing a little bit faster than us, and want to make sure that that is equitable. So I'm glad to see that that's being looked at yearly. I think that's all I have for right now. So I'll go ahead and stop. Thank you.
Other questions at this time? Or comments? Questions, comments, same time. We don't need to take them individually. Councilmember Medina.
Sure, thank you. And I'll echo the change, the appreciation in my review of the CIP, that it was a little bit more simplified. So I appreciate that effort. I still like to see some additional details in there to understand more about project timelines and how much was already spent. So I did submit a bunch of questions beforehand, and it was this morning, and I did get answers, and I'm satisfied with the answers. It's just that, will that now be folded into the CIP, like going forward for this round, so that I could be more informed of where the schedule is on these different projects. For a number of years, we would have these different projects, and we would not really, I would feel we wouldn't have the full update on what each project is, where we're at, whether it's in design, whether it's in construction, how much complete. So I know that's a lot of effort, and those are a lot of questions. I'm satisfied what I received in the email and what the questions and the answers that have been posted, but I think those questions need to be answered to help me feel comfortable when I go forward to approve the overall budget, and so that will also assist me in prioritizing what needs to get done. When we already have a project and it's near completion, and hey, let's go ahead and complete it. When we're looking at all the different projects, and like if we haven't started a project yet, it comes back to, once again, being able to say what we're going to do in a year and actually get pretty close to getting it done. And understanding that a number of projects are multi-year, whether it's putting in a brand new tank where you have to put the design in, and that may take a year, year and a half, 2 years. And then when we finally get to these different phases, it's understanding where we are in all this work, because this is an amazing amount of work. We have our own water department. We have our own police department. We have our own fire department. We're a small city doing all these things independently. And when it comes to understand and to share with the public of what we really think is going to get done, we have to be, I think, hopefully a little bit more open to explain that a little bit more, even though this year was a little easier to digest, so that people have a better understanding of what it is that's going to get done. And so 2 years from now, they could say, oh yeah, well, I understand, to pave all those streets is a multi-year project, and it's going to take a long time to pave all the streets and bring them up to the level that everybody wants. So I'll stop there. There are a number of specific projects that I would like to look at how we're going to prioritize those. And then in the staff report, it mentioned the pilot project. So is this pilot project for us to start doing this priority based on the housing element piece? Is that going to be going this year, or is that next year? So those are kind of the things that I'd like to get into a little bit more. I already see that we already gone through 20 minutes, and you know, another meeting's going to start. So perhaps we can just start with going forward and how we're going to prioritize, and if that's going to be done through a more equity lens this year, or is that something that's going to happen later?
Director Lee.
Through the chair, thanks for the question. I'll attempt to answer most of the aspects of it. I think the first part in terms of what is a CIP budget document? What is the general purpose of it? I think what we did this year was we really tried to go back to the purpose of the document itself. It's to show and identify the funding sources and the fiscal connections to how the projects are funded and which ones are approved. I think what we're discussing in terms of progress and letting the community know how far we are with projects. I agree with you. There's areas for improvement there. We've been working diligently behind the scenes to try to get that information out. I don't believe that status should be on this document, because the purpose of this document is a kind of a policy document that kind of shows the outline of our priorities, because every CIP project that is approved is a priority. Our goal is to actually work on it. They're not sitting on a list, right? So that's what the CIP document is supposed to represent. In terms of the update and status of projects, I think we hear you loud and clear. We're in the process of working our way through some of those measures and how we set this up. Like you described, there are many projects and many avenues that the city is working on, and things that they can report on. We're trying to figure out the best way to collate all those data and to be able to share that back up and share that back with the community in a digestible format. And so that just takes a little bit of time. Like we've discussed at the last council meeting, we're focusing on paving first, because we know that that is something that the community, as stated in the city survey, is really important. And we over in Public Works, and especially in engineering, love paving. We would love to continue to do more. And so I think that'll be the first step in terms of how we show progress of projects. And so I know that it's not ready for prime time yet, but once we get it up and ready, I think it'll be something that the community will be really happy about. And it'll show kind of the roadmap and the direction of where we're going, and where we're showing update statuses of projects. I believe the second question falls along the lines of categories and priorities of projects. And so the priorities of projects themselves, we're actually working on the prioritization factors. And I've had many conversations over the past couple of weeks with the internal city staff as we were developing the system. The best way for me to describe it is based on our last discussion, we unveiled the factors themselves. And I think there was a question on, hey, let's run it through this year and see how that works. And so what we did in the interim was in order for us to show people how the sausage is being made, we actually had to build the sausage making machine. So it took us a lot of development to create the entire framework and background to be able to run this through. And we've done a significant amount of work in that area. We did test it at a point where there was a proof of concept, but there's some things that we're currently fine tuning. And so we're working our way through that. We believe that at some point we will be coming back to the council to kind of show that process. I personally felt that we didn't want to dilute that conversation with the project selection in terms of what we're doing with the CIP, because they're actually two very complex topics. And so we wanted to kind of provide the space for that discussion to happen. In terms of equity and how we're applying it through our CIP projects, I know that that is a new topic for some cities, but I would like to just emphatically state that San Bruno has been focusing on equity in the past. If you look at the Avenues projects and the way we figured out where we wanted to start first, we've already had that in our ethos and how we select projects. Could we improve on that? Yes, we can, right? And so that's what we're trying to do with the new system. And so, you know, as we build the prioritization factors and we come back to council in the upcoming months, we're going to unveil that and have those types of conversations with the factors and perhaps how we should be applying it. But we do have something almost ready to share.
Just so I can confirm, so we will be doing that this year. That pilot project is for this year, or that's for next year?
That's for next.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure. I'll pause for now, and then there's a couple projects I want to talk specifically about.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Like Tom, he put it all together, so might as well.
All right. I wasn't ready for that, but that's okay. So, and you've answered the question already, and the ability to utilize Peninsula Clean Energy grant funding for a number of these projects. So if we do get the funding for these projects, then that opens up funding for other projects. But it comes back down to this. How much could we really do with what the staff we have? And in this last year, when we came down to look at our strategic initiatives, we pared it down. We got down to 5 from in the 40s of different things. And so I want to try to utilize that same thought of making sure we get done the things that we're going to do, instead of, well, no, we didn't get to that because we didn't have the staff. So having the opportunity to have this discussion, when will we prioritize? And I get it, everything's a priority, but it really isn't. We have to prioritize the things that we believe need to get done in an order of importance. And so that's kind of where I want to make sure, or to be able to have the discussion of, if this is this doable? And if it's not doable, then we should look at prioritizing these 22 of them are A priorities, and the other ones are B priorities, so that we get the A ones done. Because otherwise, it's just, if you don't, we've seen what happens if we have too many things listed as a priority. They all don't get done, and they don't get done for a number of years.
Through the chair, good question and comment. I would state that, again, for the CIP, once council funds it, it is a priority. I believe at the last, the council retreat 2 fiscal years ago, not the current one, but the one before that, we talked about the staffing capacity. Last year, we already went through that effort, right? So as we go through and we select projects, based on priority and prioritization, based on funding. We also look at staffing capacity and what we can do. So we're already currently doing that. There, of course, due to our staffing levels, which is sometimes hard for us to get back up to the staffing levels we're aspiring to do via our CIP, we do have a few projects that are backlogged that we are trying to clear out and work through. And so as we work through those backlogged projects, we're also taking that into account as we work on adding new projects. I think if you look at the CIP and we go through the exercise, there's a lot of projects that are the ones that are fully funded. I don't think anyone's going to say no, we don't need to do those, right? And if you look at the programs and the amount of funding sources that go into the specific categories, I think that'll help aid in the discussion. Like, do we not do water? Do we not do paving? That's not something that we don't want to do, right? And so we're looking at ways to efficiently do that delivery with the resourcing that we have, whether it's through staff or through other services.
Understood. So, for instance, those are all the big projects, right? The bigger ones, it's very clear. Yeah, of course we need to, replace the water system. It's identified in our water master plan, sewer master plan, all these different things. And then we have something that's relatively simple, replacing scoreboards. Something that I've been asking about over the last year, maybe even a little longer. And right now, I think I'm not aware. I believe 2 of the scoreboards just don't operate. They don't work. And they haven't worked really consistently for a couple years. I know, I'm a coach of one of the teams, and people are always asking me, bother me when I'm coaching, what's the score? And it's like, 3-2, whatever it is. But so that project is now for next year in the budget. So it's like a $58,000 project that has received $20,000 of funds from the players' groups. So that's a high priority for me. There's a person that has contacted the vendors, and it's like, hey, I understand we were in a transition year between city managers, and sometimes things, an understanding of what was going to get done before the beginning of baseball season. And it hasn't. And so if that's not going to get done until the budget's approved, then we're looking at already after the baseball season's over, right? And there's similar things with Diamond 3. Diamond 3 was damaged by a tree that fell down, knocked one of the lights out, destroyed the backstop, and here we are in March, and that field's not playable. So it's like, there are the big things that are really important, but there's also the small things that are pretty important too. So how do we get something moved up? And I think that's part of our job on the council, to provide that input. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, when do we get to step into that part? So if it was my choice, that would have been a budget amendment when we did the last round of budget amendments, and it would have been like, let's get the scoreboards, the purchase order approved, because they just come in and they hang the new scoreboard up. And so it's a minimal amount of effort, but it really is pretty impactful to the people that you have an expectation that you go to a baseball game and you're going to be able to look at the baseball scoreboard, right? So that's just one of them, right? And please don't take this as a criticism. This is something that is in our community that I deal with every week now. And I'm just bringing that forward to figure out, how do we bring, for instance, the scoreboards, or also like the pathways up in, I can't remember the park right now, but Portola? Pacific Heights, I'm sorry. And it's like, we have the money for it. It seems relatively simple. Let's replace the current width of the pathways and dig it out, and it'll, if Public Works loves paving, I'm sure they also love paving of pathways, right? So It's the things that we see in our community that get done that are also kind of small. They're not as big, but they still are important and impactful. So how we ever prioritize that, I look forward to being able to step into that. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. With that, is there anything that, I think there was kind of a, in my opinion, a question in there is that going to be a part of the process? If it is part of the process, then when does that process occur? And just since we're having it's a study session, so we're having a conversation, but I don't know if that's you're prepared or. Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
So, great points, good question. I think the question is, what is the process? So, like I said, we're working through it right now. What we first unveiled were the prioritization factors, right? In order for you to prioritize, you have to understand what all the factors are. Like, what does the community care about? We came to council at the last time we discussed this, and we shared those factors. We asked, were there any factors on that list that anyone sees as missing, right? And so we can continue to have that question. Staff worked through and diligently talked to many other cities, looked at various communities, and looked at what those factors are. And we believe that is a comprehensive list. But we could have missed something. So if there's a factor that is not in there, at the next time we come up with a discussion on this topic, we can talk through that. I think it's exciting for us to kind of talk about those factors, but the next steps after that would be working through how we prioritize those factors. That would be the next step, and I think that's the meat of the discussion that's starting to be discussed here. And so in terms of the timelines, like I said, we're coming up in the next few months. I would assume after we get through the budget, we probably would start talking about the prioritization factors and how we would work through the prioritization process. Staff has set up a framework. It's obviously not going to be perfect. No system is. But we can talk through the areas that we might want to tweak based on the recommendation.
Go ahead, Al. City Manager.
I have some general understandings of some of the questions that are being asked by Councilmember Medina, but I might want to ask our Community Services Director, Travis Carlin, to talk a little bit more about the fields and the scoreboards. My understanding is the fields are in somewhat bad shape because of the weather. They're wet, basically. And doing work on wet fields, as it's been explained to me, is not highly desirable. There are better approaches. Coincidentally, I just had this conversation with Travis 4 hours ago. And let me just ask him to address some of this, both the scoreboard question, the lights question, and the fields condition question, particularly out at Field 3.
Sure, so I'll start with the lights question. Alex is absolutely right. Weather has been a factor in fixing those. Those came to my attention just a few months ago. Still uncovering a lot of things in parks, and so trying to get to those as fast as I can. We have an issue with field lights out at Lions Park where we have all the ballasts need to be replaced. They're very old. The best thing for that park would be to replace with LED lights. So that's a project that we'd be bringing forward. So we did have an electrician scheduled this morning for that. Unfortunately, it rained, so they're not going to be working on electrical issues out at the park, and they're coming back out tomorrow morning to get to as many of those lights as they can. So that's the light issue. Over at Diamond 3, we have an issue. We prioritized that field for this CIP request because we have a light pole that's down. So that would be exchanging that or putting a new light pole up and then switching that field out to LED next year as the request for that field. As far as the scoreboards go. Councilmember Medina, you're absolutely right. They haven't worked for a number of years. That's another one that came to my attention in the recent months. With the scoreboards, it's not as simple as just hanging a new scoreboard. New scoreboards have a lot of different infrastructure that the old scoreboards didn't. There likely will need to be electrical work and or additional electricity run to those areas. We have to look into all of that. We do have a quote on the scoreboard, so we do have some solid information as far as what that's going to cost as we move forward. And once that project is approved, we can move forward and procure those scoreboards.
So I know we're talking, it's through the mayor, I apologize. So we're talking about next year's budget, but we could, though it's not agendized, to attempt to add funds to this year's budget, to have an amendment to get that project going, because if we have a bid, then the work could start as soon as we, the council applies or approves the funds. And the San Bruno Youth Baseball has $20,000 that they're also contributing. So it's really a community, definitely has skin in the game here. So my question is, how do we move forward with that project?
You mean in the current year?
Right.
So if this is a priority of the council, we would bring it, we could, just as Councilmember Medina said, we could bring back a budget amendment to appropriate funds so that we can then go out and purchase these. Again, I don't know if it's as simple as that as far as, I'll use the word logistics for lack of a better term. So I'd want to make sure I understood that I wasn't creating a false promise that we couldn't fulfill. I think these things are always much harder than they appear on the surface. I think Travis was alluding to that it's much more than a scoreboard, unfortunately. So, and there is this, in my opinion, there is this, we should do it right if we're going to do it. I would prefer not to do it halfway and just to get some lights going on a board when we could do it right, we can do it fully right the first time. So let me find out from staff kind of what's holding this up, what are the logistics of this, and move forward. And I think it's important on a CIP, on a capital improvement program like this. One of the reasons staff does try to, I'm going to use the word preload this to say, here's what we recommend, and here's what you all then choose to do. You can completely ignore recommendations, as you know, you can. But we try to create this in a way that literally each of you is not cherry picking a project saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then some of the more critical projects maybe don't get funded. And Councilmember Medina, I hear you loud and clear about what the public sees and saying, well, wait, how hard can it be to fix that? But meanwhile, we got $30 million of infrastructure being fixed underground that unfortunately nobody sees because it's just not as exciting. So I think staff's trying to come at this from, here's the professional recommendation. At the end of the day, the council gets to weigh in and make the call on the $38,000, $58,000 scoreboard. That's 100% legitimate in this process. It just shifts everything then. And I think the conversation perhaps we're trying to help the council avoid is pet project, pet project, pet project, pet project, and then we're doing pet projects and not the big stuff that really critically has to get done because we've raised rates to pay for these things. So this is the balancing act we're trying to achieve here, and I think this is what Matt's talking about. We're trying to do this in a way that's thoughtful, that's focused on the process, and I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, Councilmember Medina, but go ahead.
Well, I was still figuring out what I was going to say. I was first going to say, I'm with you on this. I believe it.
Just use this.
It's all important. It was something as simple as that. It seemed like it was more of a maintenance issue, like they went bad. So that's a CIP project. You know, we have money in our parks that should have probably just fixed it. And does it have to be in the CIP? Well, maybe not, but I appreciate this whole effort of your style of bringing it all to the council. And I agree, I don't want to have a pet project, but I also am seeing an obvious need in our community that it's just baseball. I get it, but San Bruno's a baseball town. It's just softball doesn't even have scoreboards. You know, why can't we get scoreboards for softball players? You know, maybe that could be. Maybe that would be for next year, right? But I know the answer. The answer is because they play on school property, and we'd have to put something up on school property. And I've been in discussions with the softball groups trying to get somebody to do that. And we almost got that, but the superintendent of the school left. and he was a big softball guy, and then, things happen when there's changes. So I don't want to take much time on this. I appreciate the thought and the response, and if we can hopefully get back from staff that, yeah, there's select contractors that they do it all. They come in and they put in the system, so thank you.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good that we're talking about the process, and I'm trying to understand. I know that you are in the process of creating the process for the CIP under a bigger scale of the CIP project. Is it maybe a suggestion, or is it fair to say or assume that whenever a staff proposes a budget or for funding, that you have accepted some kind of like a bidding from different contractors, so when the council approves the funding, then it's ready to go to sort of like speed up the process? And maybe like on a smaller scale projects, maybe it wouldn't be considered as a capital project, then we could have a separate priority for those smaller projects that the community sees as ASAP, like, we need to fix right away.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez, through the chair. To answer the question in terms of CIP projects and if there's a level of estimating or progress done for a project as we submit them as CIPs, the answer is yes, generally there is. But my preference would be we would do a little more planning and a little more engineering for us to be able to bring a number to the council, which I would just, let's just call it the pre-development phase. One of the challenges that we have is our engineering staff are funded mainly by projects. So in order for them to do some of that work sometimes, it requires them to be able to charge their time to a project. And so we kind of fall in a chicken and the egg situation. So we kind of work our way through that. I understand that there's things that look like maintenance problems and that we can fix those. I'll surely tell you, we come across that all the time. The fleets and facility manager sitting to the right of me, to the left of you on the screen, Ross Skuratov, we do everything that we can to maintain something. And the only time it goes to a CIP is either when it's not available for funding, right? We might need funding from a capital's perspective, or when we have discussions with the city attorney and some of the fixes that we're doing that may be we call considered maintenance repair is actually a capital project per the Public Works Contract Code. So we have to abide by those rules and regulations, so we have many discussions during those times of how we go and approach those things. So that's how we bring things up. It's not like we go there and just say, oh, put that as a CIP project. There's a lot of thought that we can put into it. And I think some of the challenges that we see for projects are things that are, we would say, quote unquote, our priorities, but we haven't done the appropriate master planning, area planning, or facilities planning for the element. It's something that just comes up, and then we're supposed to work on it right away. And so what happens is you actually see the project development while we're actually trying to build the project, right? And so that's what we're trying to slowly. It's a systemic issue that we have to address. That's why we're slowly trying to move away from that for a more thoughtful process, which starts first with the prioritization process, and then we're going to go and focus on capital planning efforts. But in order for us to do a capital planning effort, that requires some resources.
Thank you.
City Clerk, is there any public comments for this item?
There are no speaker cards for
I
this
just
item.
wanted to be mindful of time. Real quick, because I know we've got about 10 minutes before our next meeting. On Station 52, I do want to give kudos over the time. The captain's room, it was converted in-house so that there was a sleeping quarter for that person. The kitchen repair, or the kitchen upgrade that was done by through Ross, his team, and it came under budget. So I appreciate that, and I think that goes to what Director Lee was saying about being mindful of those things. If we remember, there was thought about doing an additional bathroom, which was understood because of having one for both genders, and that was going to be because after a certain point required an ADA requirement, which now is $600,000. And if we're starting to be mindful of facilities and putting in money when we're looking to do a replacement in a different location, I think I'd like us to be mindful of that, and I think we have. On the baseball lights and scoreboards, even at Lions Field, there are lights that are out. And so to me, that is, I mean, I'm not going to say a scoreboard isn't a priority, because when I managed and coached in girls softball, it was a lot easier for them to look at the board. I will say that. But to me, those lights are important during the games or practices at night, that they have adequate lighting. And I don't think that means waiting for the LEDs. I think that's something that we're talking about as far as getting that done, and why can't we do that now to kind of bring it up to a certain standard? Just my thought. I do appreciate being more realistic on numbers. I think sometimes we were given numbers that it was like, it should be, but I know sometimes I'm looking at numbers and I'm saying, wow. And I know that it's trying to be in a comparison of what could be, and that's a replacement of 52. It seems like a lot, but that's, you're trying to weigh in if there were a purchase required. Other elements are being looked at, but we don't know that outcome. I do agree with Dr. Lee. I do agree with Director Lee in regards for the CIP and its purpose. And I think that needs to remain in that. But if it's about giving updates and where we're at percentage-wise, I can understand that. I did want to know on the, I think it's $25,000 is to have upgrades of some sort here at the senior center for city council planning commission meetings. That's the way I'm reading it. Maybe I misunderstood it. And so I'm trying to understand if the intent is, you know, to go down the street, why would we be putting more money invested in that? That's just a question. Doesn't have to be answered now. What I am going to say is I think an important element is still the safe route to schools, and I know it's a funding issue. I know at the Transportation Authority, we're doing strategic initiatives for the next 5 years, and that has been one of the questions asked from the CAC, Citizen Advisory Committee, as well as the TA Board, to prioritize that. And I still want us to be mindful of the Scott Street grade separation. Back, as you know, back in March of 2022, the board I sit on allocated $4.95 million to that and the South Linden. And I still want us to be mindful of putting in our requests to get those monies and resources, and I think it's critical. And I'm happy to continue that, but I think I just want us to be mindful of that. And then on the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, downstairs at City Hall, I want to be thankful as well, because I remember a day back when, goes way back, some may remember, that obviously it was a bomb shelter. Obviously it was converted, it was half of an EOC, and it was half of the staff lounge. Then it became a, shall we say, a storage bin, to where it was nothing but boxes and storage. And I remember getting on the council saying, this is really important. Now, it's not because of me. I mean, it goes way back. But then we had the situation of the 210 PG&E pipeline explosion. Had we not had that up in that area and ready to go, we would have been outside in a tent provided for by the county, instead of with facilities and in a appropriate environment. But I do, because I've been there, and I do want to say that the strides in the technology that has been advanced in that EOC from where it was, from what I first remember, to how it's kind of gone to the next level, and it's going to go to the next level with some of the elements that are described, and the ability to think outside of that. If we have to be somewhere in City Hall, but we all can't be in one room due to like the COVID situation. So I do want to be acknowledge staff in them trying to think forward and improve upon, but also I think be very mindful. And I know there are some improvements here. They were alluded to on the bathrooms at the senior center. I understand too that there's some other basic stuff when it comes to carpeting and whatever, but it's not down the corridor, the main hallway, to my understanding. There was some discussion of that is not occurring. So I think that will make some others happy. And I think, to be mindful of time, I think that's it for right now. If there's nothing else, that'll give us a few minutes. And so this will conclude, unless there's anything.
Let me just offer one more piece of information for the council. One of the things we should be doing with our quarterly check-ins on the budget is there should be a quarterly check-in on progress in the CIP. I mean, they go hand in glove, and so I am remiss in reminding myself that I don't believe we've given you an update on the CIP current year to date. And we're not prepared to do that tonight, but when we come back with the third quarter update, we will be able to provide you with that sort of management metric so you can see where we are on various projects. So that's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. With that, we're going to adjourn the special meeting to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held obviously tonight in about 5 minutes here at 7 o'clock. The special meeting is concluded and adjourned.